Tyranid fans, Spectre Senence here once again. Basically going to do this time an army review from Spectre Studios. This one is going to cover the new Tyranid Codex. I have brought aside some clever things, rule books that will help us kind of decipher what's going on. I feel that I can give you a pretty good insight of what this army is going to be basically capable of do and the changes, because since I'm dating way back since 2001 from this old codex, as we have gone through our editions of Tyranid codexes, I have been following them for some time. So we brought some things back for reference, and we're going to go through this book pretty well through, so you know basically what you're getting out of this book, because this was a big thing for me when it was coming out. We heard a lot of rumors, a lot of things that were sounding like the Tyranids were going to be very, very scary in the GW universe. And when this codex hit the fan and was now out on shelves and the Tyranid players were getting hold of this, it has gone to a complete collapse of faith in this army. So we're going to see what we can do. Alright, first off, basically pouring through this has got to be one of the better codexes in terms of fluff. There are a number of pages in here really detailing a lot of these additional stories from all the fleets that they've kind of added before, like High Fleet Kraken, High Fleet Behemoth, High Fleet Leviathan, and a lot of the grounds they kind of cover and putting the historical things in back. So I really like that. I haven't really poured through a lot of it, so it's a bit of good reading in that aspect there. So we'll get into that as that comes into play. But that's a nice piece for what they did with that. I do enjoy that. Okay, so a couple things I'm going to reference the oldest of the codex here in terms of some things that are pretty close by, and getting basically to the start of a lot of the Tyranid rules and powers. And some people have been reviewing this, so it's pretty good with that, but we want to make sure that we're on the same page of stuff. And of course, with the way they do things, we got to make sure that we're in with a lot of the stuff here. So they actually put the powers in the front of the organization stuff. Alright, so right off the bat here, as we start with things here, the instinctive behavior for Tyranids has changed, and this has some results that are pretty much getting some people a little upset in some aspects, but I'm going to tell you where to really work with that. Basically, before we had lurk and feed, and basically if they were not synapse range, you rolled, and then they would either go for terrain if they lurked, or they would charge forward if they fed. So it was really better for feed creatures to kind of move, to not really be in synapse. You didn't really care as long as they were winning. You know, they didn't lose close combat and assault. That was more of the issue that you had to worry about for your feeding Tyranids out of synapse range. Well, they made it so now that there's some danger into that. So there's about 50% chance that in these now categories that they have, that something bad will happen to the Tyranid unit out of synapse. So synapse is very important, and in the fluff aspect of that as a Tyranid player, I'm okay with that. You know, as a crutch for what the Tyranid did, if you kind of look at where the demons are with their fearless got change, this does give you a little bit more of, you need those synapse creatures to come around. It is better if you're playing against Tyranids to try to break down the synapse, because it makes much more of that type of element that you're dealing with this horde and there's a weakness that you can kind of exploit versus the Tyranid players or using it. So lurk now, if you fail on a 1 through 3, the unit is actually going to fall back. It is considered broken for all aspects here. So that's going to kind of change a lot. And having abused the Termagants before, that's pretty fair. You know, I mean, they're a pretty cheap unit. The synapse is pretty important for that, and to just have them kind of sitting on objectives makes it a big deal. So they're likely not going to be able to do that consistently enough. So you got to kind of make sure that the Termagant unit is using some proper synapse for that. Other than that, they'll seek cover, is what the normal thing they used to do. And then 6, they'll actually still seek cover, but now they'll get stealth on top of that. So if you do on a Lent roll, a Termagant unit could all of a sudden lose morale, and all of a sudden you're trying to get them out of terrain, and they're on a bonus of a +1 to their in-terrain cover. So that can make them very, very difficult to deal with. And especially like they go to ground too now, that's going to make that Termagant unit almost impossible to get off the objective if that's the turn that happens for the Tyranid players. So, you know, it's a dice roll, it's a gamble, but it's not really terrible. The other one is feed, and this is where a lot of people are getting a little upset, because feed now is if you lose synapse for a feed creature on 1 through 3, the unit will actually eat itself. Meaning every model will get to put an attack, will be putting attack on its own unit. So if there are 16 Hormagaunts out of synapse range, you fail this, that's 16 hits at its own strength. You will get their armor save regardless of the weaponry that the models have, so they will end up, you will have a small chance of saving on these type of units, but you can end up destroying quickly. So that's bad. The 4 through 5, it will kind of move and do what it used to do before in the assault. And 6, it'll have the ability to rage, which is pretty potent. Again, if you kind of look at some of these aspects here, there are the negatives, but if you happen to roll that 6 during a key phase, all of a sudden this unit is a little bit more deadlier than it was for a little bit of that. Now the other one that I really, I don't think a lot of people are kind of looking at well is the instinctive behavior hunt that was been added. 1, 2, 3, the unit will now just go to ground automatically, and so now it's kind of hiding and sort of burrowing for what it's saying, and that's pretty good. But there's a stipulation here that says at least one model with a fearless special rule will now treat this as proud, which is the next one up, which is the unit cannot run and must instead shoot at the closest enemy that is within range. So it'll still be attacking an enemy unit. You will move it in the movement phase, so it is doing what it is. It will be hunting for a target, so you can kind of put it in a position where you kind of want it to hit the better thing, but it is still, again, shooting. And the fearless aspect, where some of these key creatures will have this rule, have fearless, so you're not taking the 1 through 3 poor thing, which they immediately just go to ground and do nothing. They'll be actually very effective. So this kind of instinctive behavior thing is really going to give some bonuses to certain units. I want you guys to be aware of that. And again, if you roll a 6, another big thing, now the unit has preferred enemies, so it's going to be rolled 1s to hit and 1s to wound. So that's a pretty good deal. So I actually like this chart. It is a little scary for the cannibalistic horror, but I think if you plan synapse in this army, you're going to have some aspect to do some things, and you'll be able to work with it. This and the feed thing is going to be more problematic to basically the Hormagaunts and the Ripper Swarms. Single model creatures won't do anything to itself. So creatures such as Trigons, or the Moloch who has feed, it's not going to do anything to itself because it's a single model. So it'll go to the Devour phase. So what seems like it's an issue, once it gets down to a single model, that it's not going to affect it. So there's our chart. We kind of it's an interesting thing, and it'll keep things a little bit fresh and different during the game. So it's very interesting in that. All right, then we go to the Shadow of the War. I'm kind of indifferent to this. I guess it's almost about the same. I'm not really sure. Just because of the way the dice rolls can kind of go. Prior, you remember, it was if you were within 12 inches of a creature with Shadow of the War, in Shadows of the War, 3d6 to try to get your psychic power. It seemed likely that you would be able to get this power off sometimes if you rolled well enough. If you think about it, because we see a lot of that with the Mind Shackle Scarabs and stuff like that. And I've seen this roll, especially with the Doom of Malantai. You had to roll, you take wounds from this thing, from the psychic drain, and players seem to be able to consistently make it. So now it's -3 straight to a Psyker's leadership. That's not just to get his powers off. Any Psyker now that was within at least one creature of this power is now at -3 leadership. So there are 8 Psykers out, level leadership 8 Psykers out there. That means their leadership now is on a 5 if they're within this, like the Psychic Choir, stuff like that. You're not going to get any better than a 10. So, now these creatures, an average dice roll is a 7. So anything kind of high now, your Psykers are not going to get their power off. There is no chance for extra perils though, but it does kind of seem like it might shut down some psychic powers. So that will be very interesting. I can definitely see this army now being horrendous to Grey Knights, which is odd. The Grey Knights now will not like fighting this army because every Brotherhood of the Psyker, every Strike Squad, the Dread Knight, the Inquisitor, the Inquisitors, the leadership, all of them are around -3. So this affects anything. So if they're shot at and they need to make a failback or whatever type of morale checks, they're in trouble. And with power later in the game, later in this book that we'll talk about, that's devastating. It could be very devastating. So that'll be trouble. Synapse did not change. It pretty much is just worded differently, but it acts in all effects that we're used to. So once models are in 12 inches, they have become fearless, and we all know that. I am not going to go too much over the warlord traits. You can still choose to use the basic rulebook one. It really is up to you. The warlord traits in the Tyranid Codex, to me, seem kind of lackluster. There's some things that could be useful. Most aren't. It's just as much as the basic rulebook, like Nature's Bane with changing current of his jungle. I don't often play on jungles, so to get that type of thing is going to be tough. You know, you might ruin one cover area for an enemy. Night vision, that's a minor rule, you know, for the lower part. Synthetic linchpin is nice. It's 18 inches, so it kind of makes you, you know, if you're not using the Swarm Lord, that will help a little bit more. Mind Eater is one that's strange. It's 2 victory points for each enemy model of like an independent character you kill in a challenge. I don't feel comfortable with Tyranid characters being able to kill really a lot of the other characters in other codexes. Only the Swarm Lord has the invulnerable save, which so he already has his Warlord trait, so he can't get this. That makes a lot of the other Tyranids very not likely to do the killing, especially in close combat. So I don't know if that's a very strong one. It goes with Death Leaper, but again, I don't know if he's capable of just outright killing independent characters consistently enough to make that safe. The only one I really enjoy was Adaptive Biology. And that Old One Eye has that, and that will give you feel no pain once you take your first wound. So I like that. That's kind of neat. So I enjoy that part of that a little bit. But that's a 1 in 6, and it's random as much, so it's up to you. All right. So going through each of these, the Hive Tyrants did get adjusted. They are now Psychic level 2, so already that's a big boom for the Tyranids, because you know all this level 1 stuff was just ridiculous. But so they have that. The Indescribable Horror, I was checking, all monstrous creatures have fear, so basically models will have to roll 3d6 against that. So that could be viable, because it's kind of like where you're going to get the old Perixium now, so your opponents are weapon skill 1 should they fail that. So I actually see this upgrade as being a good purchase. The Hive Commander is also useful with the outflank, especially if you can still get the Taveragon going on. And the Old Adversary is not as good as it was in the old edition before. The old edition, it basically you give units within 6 inches of the Hive Tyrant, and the Hive Tyrant itself got to basically have the preferred enemy. Now it's only him, so I don't see this being as greatly useful. I mean, it's a little bit, but I don't know. It just seems, for the points, it just doesn't seem like it's viable. So the other two, I would say yes, because the one for the outflank is good, especially on the Taveragon. That makes him pretty good. Just to get the big bug out there on the side. That's pretty much what you're really going to get it for. And Indescribable Horror can really make an effect for the units. But remember, this is not going to work against Marines and stuff, so you know, take it accordingly. This is, you know, people that you can kind of affect. That's where Indescribable Horror would be good. If you're going to be playing Marines, don't bother taking this power, because they're not going to be affected. So that's where you're at with that. The big thing with Tyranid Warriors was the fact that we were kind of hoping that they would get Eternal Warrior. That did not happen. So that was a poor thing right there. But going back in the other part of this, when we're looking at the points for building though, as an old fan from the older editions, you were able to arm them as you like them, and now you can do that. You weren't able to do that here in the former Codex. You were able to do so in prior codexes before. They can have whatever weaponry. They're back to doing that. So I was happy with that. So I'm glad I didn't change too many of my models from that aspect there, and they go forward. They have now gaunts, although you know Termite Gants is supposed to be a little different, and Gargoyles got grouped into this grouping of information. Virtually nothing of this really changed as much, except kind of like the gargoyles have this blinding venom attack, which has now the blind effect from the special rulebook. So they're all about the same cost of cheap. Termagants are actually a point cheaper, so that they're nice. The Hormagaunts look like they're cheaper, but their upgrades were actually given a bonus up, a point more expense. So I looked at the Hormagaunts that I usually run. Basically, so a Hormagaunt with Toxin Sac is the same cost as it was in last edition. The model is 1 point cheaper, but the upgrade is 1 point more expensive. So yeah, you can run cheaper Hormagaunts if you don't want poison, but if you pretty much want to use a lot of this poison in this army. So basically, any models that are hit by the weapon with a special rule must immediately take an initiative test. If the test is passed, all is well. The test fail, all model unit in the weapon skill are reduced to weapon skill and ballistic skill 1. So here's another effect to get models down to ballistic skill 1 or weapon skill 1. So we like that. So that's cool. I like that effect there. So these units are good. They're still solid. They're still very viable in this codex. The big thing too is Hormagaunts got their bounding leap has changed. If you remember, it was 3d6, take the highest during the run phase. Now you will be rolling the 1 dice for the run, but you get to re-roll it with fleet because they come with that. Well, I might be wrong. You need to. So we need to get the adrenaline sacs on them to give them the fleet. Nope, they come with fleet. I totally missed that. So they come with fleet, so you get to re-roll the run, which is good. But now their bounding leap gives them basically a d6 plus 3 inches in the run, so they can actually move up a 9 in the run phase. So go 6 for that. That's 15 inches a Hormagaunt can move on you. So that's pretty darn quick. That's back to some pretty serious speed for the Hormagaunts. So Gaunts, did really well with that. Hormagaunts are really, really good now. You better be careful with that. Except for the sizing talent, which we'll get to a little bit later in weaponry. Gene Stealers are really poor. Nothing changed out of the Gene Stealers. You're still gonna have to show up, take shots, and then try to get out, and then go to Overwatch. There's nothing in their thing that helps them become the effective combat killers beyond the weapon skill and rending claws. And we'll talk to rending claws. But one of the big things I didn't really care for is the Broodlord got for big meaty points that he is. He ended up with a psychic power horror, and that is not going to help him. I have no idea. I guess that's the only way of helping you is you got to take a Broodlord now to pin a unit, to keep them so you can assault them. But you're going to be able to shoot anyways. I don't know. I really don't know that. I guess that's the kind of way to keep them covered, I suppose. So I guess there's a bit of a combination. If you use, they show up, the Broodlord casts horror on them, and then hopefully they don't get the effect. And I guess I can look at this combination and see where we're at with that, how that would work for you. I think that's really the contents of this review. So basically, you take the horror. They're gonna have to take a leadership test at -2. It'll be close. Most leadership squads you can hit it is 9, so you get them down to a 7. Again, most dice are gonna roll that 7, so a little bit higher. They'll pin them, so they'll be able to snap firing at them early, and then Overwatch. So there's a chance. So I guess that is an addition to what they've done. I still kind of like the Broodlord. It's his ability to really kind of take out a character in that group. This power is not transferable. He always knows that. So this is what all Broodlords are going to do for you. So we'll see how that kind of works out. I think that'll make it interesting, but that's the combination that you're kind of doing with a Broodlord. You have to take the Broodlord to go with your Gene Stealer, so he does the horror, and he'll also choose units that are isolated. You don't want these guys in a big group because he's only going to block one guy. All right, Lictors. Lictors are interesting because of the new chameleon skin. From some of the changes they got, they pretty much don't really scatter. Well, pretty much nothing really changed for that. So basically the chameleon skin and the pheromone trails are pretty much the same as they were before. I guess a lot of it you can kind of do. The flesh hooks are kind of like strength 6 for that, because they're going to use their strength profile for helping drop other models. This is really the only way to do it, those that can deep strike. So it's kind of going to help Molochs and Trigons kind of pop up, maybe some strikes and other jump infantry. You can also use them to get directly behind transports that are weak. So you'll be glancing on a 4, pen on a 5. That may have a little bit of a semblance of combat tactics with it. You can't kind of split them up, so it's kind of a lot to put into 1 or 2 or 3 models. They're all going to go up in the same area. So your choice there. I think they're okay. I would play them for a little bit of fun, but I wouldn't use them in not many competitive lists. Also looking at some aspects here, the Zoanthrope is, I like what they did with the Zoanthrope, to be honest. I almost for sure going to be taking these guys on my list now. You're going to take a unit of 3. The biggest thing now, they're called the Brotherhood of Psychers. So before, to get their powers, you were rolling individually for each one. They were still squads, you're still taking the same shot. So all that just kind of got grouped up in a mechanic now. So 1 roll for the Brotherhood of Psychers. So there's no way to kind of like all 3 of them take a wound in one phase if you catastrophically fail. But they're in the same essence. 1 roll can make it so that none of them are shooting at all. So that could happen on 11 or 12 because they are leadership 10. So that will help. So you're gonna hopefully most things will be good, but they are synapse creatures, so that's gonna be key. They still have the 3+ invulnerable save. They are the interesting though that they're level 2 psychers, so they will get the warp blast, which is a 2 combination power blaster lance for that, but they will also generate 1 more power. That's a big bonus for these guys. So they become still the tank killing capacity they have, but if you roll something else, you can actually get them to, you can take the default power that increases their synapse range, and since there's 3 models, that's a lot of range. So that was kind of old back on the old edition for Tyranids, where Zoanthropes kind of were almost that. They were just kind of beacons behind the army that kind of kept them in play. So they've kind of have gone back into that old element there, and that makes them pretty viable. Toughness 4 still, so they can be insta-pop, but with a 3+ invulnerable, you have a 2/3 chance of pretty much ignoring any chance of that, ignoring that effect from those weaponry. So good aspect of that. So we like the where the Zoanthrope goes. The Tyrant Guard. So the Tyrant Guard and the Hive Guard got put into place here. The Hive Guard, which I will talk about, I never had the models, but I do plan on getting some, and not really because they're more competitive. They're not. The Hive Guard got a ballistic skill reduction from a 4 to a 3. They still have the Impaler Cannon, and you'll go with that, but the Hive Guard did get Hunt, which I told you before is good, but they don't have Fearless, so they will have that issue to have to deal with. And the Impaler Cannon is still the same. It says it ignores cover, so you'll have that issue to kind of deal with there. So, but it does have homing, which pretty much allowing you to shoot the targets that were out of line of sight. So, kind of the same there. But again, like I said, the ballistic skill was reduced, so you have to be a little wary of that with the Hive Guard. Now, the Tyrant Guard actually got better because they have the shield wall rule that was changed from their older one, which basically made any Hive Tyrant or Swarm Lord that joined them a unit, kind of gave that character, the independent character, kind of to make that unit part. But now, they automatically pass. So the Tyrant Guard will take all wounds that you want to allocate onto them automatically. So they pass all lookout sirs. That's awesome. So you can choose not to do it. You can choose not to. You can really choose how that kind of is going to play itself out, kind of keeping the unit more alive or whatever. But it'll actually be able to do that for what they have there. I did prefer that, and I can check some of their. I think also their combinations of weaponry was also increased a little bit more from what they had. They are out of the HQ as well, but they don't take up a slot like normal. But they actually had bonuses to a lot more weaponry choices. Now they can take toxin sacks. Now they can take the adrenal glands. Those are two things. They can take crushing claws, which actually will increase their strength to 6. So these guys got a lot of options for what they were, and they are 10 points cheaper to the base start from what happened. So excuse me there. So that's a really good bonus. So these guys are very, very viable for what you're looking at. Venomthorpe's pretty much didn't change from everything you have. The wording is a little tricky. I got tripped up by this a little bit, but thanks to my community, they kind of helped out. It basically gives all friendly models within Codex Tyranids that are within 6 inches of at least one Venomthorpe have the Shrouded Special Rule. Remember, if one unit has the Shrouded Special Rule, it will confer it to the rest of the unit. So it's a kind of a trickle down thing you got to read the rules with, which caught me because I'm thinking like it only has now a 6-inch bubble. But from where it is written, once one model has the Shrouded Rule, it confers it to the unit, so you can continue to stretch out the gauntlet line like you did before. So the Venomthorpe will continue to do that. The other thing is what its use of Toxic Miasma, and I guess we'll go over that a little bit later there. So he has a little bit more of a quicker hitting capacity compared to the old Lash Whip things before. All right, the big disappointment for a lot of people is the Taveragon. Yeah. Well, this was the biggest spawning issue for people out there on their list, and it took a hit. So you probably won't see as many of them in the new Codex. It can still do the current job if you kind of used it for what it was before. It will spawn. It will. It still has the psychic feedback if that's the case. It does not have the access to the old psychic powers it once did. So it can't kind of build up on the psychic powers and choose as needed anymore. It's only going to roll 1. It can't have the fallback of Dominion, which it originally started with, if you remember back when it was first created there. So you can take that, and then you're kind of rolling for that. It's only psychic level 1. It can be made into a troop, but you now need 30 Termagants to do that instead of the original 10. So there's a lot more points that are going to be soaking up to get this thing into the troop category. And other than that, also, it does not confer the toxic sacs or adrenal glands or any upgrades that it kind of had onto the Termagants like it had done before. So it's kind of like its own creature thing of its own there. So you can kind of do some of those things that you wanted, but not all the stuff that you did in a much significant point increase than you had before. So it was at 160 in the old book. It's at 195, so a 35-point core jump right there. You can have some interesting things. The biomorph and the thorax biomorphs with the Tyranid bio, it can have bio artifacts as well. So there is some ways to kind of make him a little bit more nastier if this is your choice. But you gotta remember you're putting a lot of points into this guy to make it a little bit. The crushing claws are still effective with him. Pretty well because of his low strength, so you can kind of get some little things that kind of add up to it. But just like I said, be a little wary. Raveners didn't seem like they got better either. They had an attack reduction. Some of the things just seemed to kind of put them in the okay range. They didn't stand out for me right off the bat when I looked at this stuff. So again, it's one of your choices. I guess the biggest thing is the Red Terror is back from the old edition of 3rd, and can be added to the squad. And he has a good rule where he can swallow a unit whole. On a charge, he'll get the additional attack. He'll get like 2 extra hits to kind of make it. He needs at least 4 to hit on a first charge, so the ratio is there. Other than that, after that, the percentages of him hitting all 4 attacks, because he only has 4 to make the swallow effect, are pretty. I don't see average or below average from that, depending on your role. So it goes from that aspect there. Yeah, that's pretty much him. The next are Tyranid artillery organisms. I feel that the biophores are really powerful in this edition. The spore mines now kind of are it's not like randomly going in a direction, and I want to double check with this, but the spore mines, the spore mines kind of went D6 before, but now it's kind of like you can direct them. They're no longer random. So the spore mine will go D3, because it's half the inches of thing during a run, but then to a charge. So maybe not as fast, but it just seems like it's kind of like building. However, if more of them are in a detonation, the strength of that spore mine is actually increasing. So very effective. The barrage rule is now added to these guys, which makes them, you know, good at killing a lot of the other Xenos armies out there. That's going to make it pretty devastating. Bivor's also got an additional wound. There were 2 wound models in the last edition, now they're 3. So that was another thing that popped right out of my mind. And the other point, like I meant before, these guys don't have the lurk rule anymore. They have the hunt instinctive behavior. So they are shooting at somebody pretty consistently from there. So they're going to continue to basically do a lot of that. So as I said, they seem solid. I really like them. Now the next one that was also listed in that part is the Exocrine, which is I thought was fantastic because I'm one of those that had these armor cast models. I didn't have the Haro specs, but I'll talk about him in a sec. But the Exocrine was one that I have. If you've seen in my battle report, I've used it a lot as a T-Rex until I got one, the newer kit. So he's got an AP2 weapon. He's got 2 type of weapon. It's a 24-inch range. He can either fire a big blast or he can stream 6 shots in it. So the Exocrine can kind of do some damage. It's strength 7. Not so much against heavier stuff, so you know anything 13 or higher, but he can really lace, you know, some lighter armored stuff, walkers, light transports, and very heavily armored men. He can just an Exocrine is going to light him up pretty bad, and he can not move during that phase and get to that ballistic skill 4. So he kind of like moved up to where I felt like the Hive Guard were kind of messing with, and you're doing that. And this is a monstrous creature, so with a 3+ armor save, regeneration, with a 5 wound model, these monstrous creatures are going to be an issue. The next thing from the old armor cast is the Haro spec, and I gotta say he's got my interest. I feel like this is a fun. He's gonna do really awesome for you, or he may just do nothing for you. It's a feeder beast, basically kind of almost with the old frenzy type of Blood Angels Dreadnought thing. If he makes a wound, an unsaved wound, he'll get another attack. Now with weapon skill 3, that's not all great, but you know, in still an aspect, you know, with the right enough models, if he's around gargoyles, putting opponents at weapon skill 3, stuff like that, because they're blinded. This guy can make some, you know, he's a monstrous creature, so it's AP2. He's gonna cause wounds. So you better be able to deal with this. Otherwise, he's just gonna eat. The thing about him is he's a 5 wound model at toughness 6, 3+ armor save. So you gotta hit him with the big stuff. And if you do wound him, if he does eat and wound you, he's going to get his wounds back. So this is a quickly consuming organism beast that the Tyranids have come out that can really, you think you have him, but if you get something weak in front of him, he'll get right back up to his full health, and you'll be back all over again, starting this thing a mess. Also, when wounding him, you know, in close combat, it's like it's not a creature that you want to be really being close to, because he also has acid blood. So if you are in close combat wounding him, you are going to get hit with an AP2 weaponry back. So this thing has an amazing factor of just destroying things around him, and I find him very, very interesting. And he's really going to be my next purchase coming up from what I have right here. So I like that. The Pyrivore is listed in these feeder organisms, and the Pyrivore is horrendous. Yeah, he was. You know, with a drop pod, he was somewhat viable in the old Codex. He can't get the pod anymore because the spore is gone. And the flamethrower weapon is no longer turret, so it has to be right next to him. He has acid blood, acid maw, but I just can't see many people getting too close to this guy. He did get an additional wound, but with a 4+ armor save, it's just not. I just don't see it. Not for the slot he takes up, not for what he does. I mean, if he was a troop, maybe. You know, you're in the wrong spot for any Tyranid player to take this. I find this this will be the rarest Tyranid organism you'll ever fight on a battlefield, is the Pyrivore. So, you'll see that. The Carnifexes. I really want to get into these guys here. So, this is another big change for the Tyranid players. So, originally a Carnifex would cost you 160 points. They are now down to 120. Okay, a lot of those big upgrade points are also down. So Carnifexes will likely see the table. They're a popular model. You can continue to brood them up. And now, you know, with the point reductions, why not? They're a strength 9 creature, toughness 6. There's a couple other big organisms around, so card fixes can find their way on the table, especially with the new charge rules. You know, you're going to get that extra distance from the charge. These things make some good capacity to hit, so you know you want to be aware of this. The Living Battering is changed. It is now a D3 Hammer of Wrath attack from them instead of 1, which all monsters creatures have, but now they can actually hit up to 3 times with the Hammer of Wrath, with a lot of their stuff being kind of reduced for what they have. Again, you can also mix and match. You can have anyone with a different monstrous bio cannon. So from Venom cannons to Stranglethorn cannons, you can kind of really do that with the card fixes. So their instinctive behavior is feed. So if you do brood them up, be wary. Although remember, they will wound themselves on 2s. They will have a 3+ save because it does not take into account them being monstrous creatures AP2 on the feeding chart. So they can kind of go with things. They're leadership 7, so you know it's dicey. So like I said, be wary of them, but they might be able to do the job. The Ripper Swarms went up in price. I didn't see much difference from what they really are, or what they're gonna do for you. So they'll still be out there for what you can do, with a lot of the same upgrades and stuff like that from that aspect there. Moloch's gonna get changed, and I was actually curious and also intrigued by this, and I think it can actually work. The old Moloch, when it erupted from a model underneath a unit, had 1 chance to kind of wound or penetrate the vehicle. Once it did that, everything was kind of pushed to the side, and then the Moloch sprouted up from that. The Molochs now in the Terror of the Deep, it will come up, hit everything again with the same strength, with strength 6, but it's AP2. I don't really remember if that was the same on the other Moloch before. I felt like, it might have been the same. I remember it killing some infantry pretty well. But that's an effect versus vehicles. Yeah, so it's still the same thing. We'll ignore cover. It basically does state that aspect there, so when it comes up. But anything that doesn't kill, you don't do the moving away anymore. Again, you look under the template from what was basically left over. Basically, everything will get hit a second time. So your 2 chances to wound and penetrate anything that's under the template. If everything is cleared out, now you kill everything and they're dead, and the vehicle is destroyed, then the Moloch arrives. It goes in there. If there's 1 or more units that are remaining, or models to the unit are remaining, then the Moloch suffers a mishap. So it could be chancy that you can end up losing a model pretty badly if you just can't seem to roll the wound. But a strength 6 AP2 is, you know, short of Terminators with Storm Shields, or runnable saves that you can kind of make it up, but still you're likely going to make a lot of wounds on it and really hurt something pretty big. So on the vehicles, I'd say be close. You know, that's still a very less chance of that. So the Moloch is really going to go for infantry now, but it is again very interesting. Trigons seem to be, I think, a little bit more expensive compared to the old. I'll just double check because they're all out of the heavy support, how they move them around. So he's actually 10 points cheaper as a basic Trigon, and the Trigon Prime is now a totally different model. No. So yes, they're both actually heavy support, 240. So it's basically 10 points cheaper for the Trigon and the Trigon Prime. It's still heavy support. Again, if you're looking for that synapse, the Trigon Prime is probably gonna have a lot of meat to that because of what he's able to kind of really bring to the table. A lot of the other stuff he'll be, I think, okay. There's some things you can kind of mess around with him to make him viable. The next one going into this, which is my favorite, will be the Hive Crone. I picked this one up on the launch of all this stuff as things. He's a monstrous creature, flying monstrous creature. So he's at strength 5, toughness 5, a 4+ armor save. I like this guy because of he's got a vector strike, but it's not at his strength 5, it's a vector strike, strength 8. So this means that the Crone can really just start wailing against other vehicles in the sky when he hits them. It's strength 8, side armor. That's going to, you know, you're glancing other flyers at 4, 5, or 6 now. It's a definite pen. That's awesome. you know, and that's going to be 2 hits because it's D3 plus 1. So this is awesome for that. Not to mention it has 4 tentacles that it tentacles to reroll to hit him at ballistic skill 3, so good chances of hitting. Once it hits, then you get the haywire effect. So 2 through 5, it's a glance. 6, it's a pen, right then and there. So that's a big deal for this creature right here. The dual cannon is a nice anti-infantry part to that, and also this hive gnome can take a cluster, the spine clusters, which is a big blast template, which will is great against troops. So this is you should really be picking this up. This is going to be something that will be in a lot of people's army. The cluster spines. That's just a big strength 5, large blast template. So the crone has a lot of things it can do. If it doesn't want to go down and smash something, like if it goes down and smashes, it's a monstrous creature. That's strength 10, AP 2, reroll armor. So the crone is a creature that will compensate for some of those, for the other things that you kind of need. It has feed, so again, it's a single creature, so it's not going to attack itself. So it's fine with that, and like I said, you're going to be okay with a lot of those aspects there. Leadership 10, so it's not going to fail its leadership often, so you don't have to worry so much about this creature, so this is very good. The Harpy is good, much the same as the Crone. It's more of helping versus anti-infantry with Twin Link Stranglethorn cannons, Spore Mine Sis, so you can really drop those barrages. I feel it's more for Xenos. 3 armor and better creatures aren't going to be too affected by the Harpy. But if it does assault, it's going to put -5 to the initiative. So it could be a good combination creature if you have some other things that you kind of work with. So it's not bad for what it was, but it's okay. T-Rex, to me, is pretty much the same. I don't think he's too much different from what you from expecting before. The point cost kind of gets back up when you take the Rupture Cannon. It's much more expensive. When it appears to be from there, when it looks like it goes down, it's going to go right back up because of the upgrade there. The Swarm Lord is nice. You remember he had all the 4 psychic powers, but he was really only casting 1 spell. Now he's back to magic level. Well, he was magic level 2. He's now magic level 3, so he's going to be kicking off a lot more of these powers. You have to roll these powers now from the psychic table. You're pretty much never going to take the default primaries because he has Synthetic Linchpin. Well, you could to put it up to 24 inches range, I suppose, because now there's no set amount to that. So that he can really be the anchor for what it was. And if you give him, like I said, the bodyguard, they automatically do lookout sirs. He could be a tough beast to kind of take down. He's a character though, so you gotta watch out for challenges. He did not. The thing that basically lost with him was you had to reroll your invulnerable saves against him. But he still has the insta-death, so that's okay. From everything else from what you get out of that. Weapon skill 9, solid, definitely a deadly creature there. And he can give Furious Charge. He also can give Monster Hunter, which I thought was interesting, and Preferring. So, those are some pretty good options there. So the Swarm Lord is still very good for what it is. I like old One Eye. The only thing I really don't care for is that he's in the HQ choices. So you have to kind of deal with him in that regard, but I guess I can take it because his Warlord trait is the Feel No Pain. So he doesn't regenerate as easily maybe because he regenerated before on the old 5 or 6s. He's now regenerating 1 wound on a 4. So he will slowly get back wounds, probably more likely with a big 50%. Still has a Berserk Rampage. And that aspect there, and again, he's fearless and all that stuff like that. So I don't, there's not really a whole lot for him. He doesn't have Synapse, so you basically are ruling for his instinctive behavior. So an HQ that you may not have full control over. So we'll see how that works out. He still has Alpha Leader, which is Leadership 8, which I think is okay. He's basically helping the small creatures like Gaunts. Maybe the Carnifexes because of 1 more point better, but that's pretty much his different. Death Leaper got a lot of changes. It still has the D3 to affect the character, but the biggest thing is now here with the where is it, you can only snap fire shots at Death Leaper, which means units with flamers and stuff can't even aim at him with this from that aspect at all. So he's interesting for what he'll be able to do. I think he's a curious model to kind of mess around with. He may be able to do some cool things. So we'll see how that kind of works out. And in all aspects, he acts like a lictor. All right, so now we get past all the creatures. Now we're into the weapons and biomorphs. I was a little displeased at the fact that the Bone Sword went to AP basically 2, or ignore armor, to AP 3. Kind of like when they were pretty deadly, but you know, looking back at it now, you know, you have a lot of monstrous creatures. It's just not that necessary, I suppose. So you know, basically these are for the warriors and the strikes that have these. They're on my strikes. If you were watching any of my battle reports, the life drain now happens on a 6, so there is an aspect that it could kill easier, because remember that before it was for a single bone sword it was 2d6 leadership. So leadership 9s and 10s, it wasn't very likely for them to fail that. But now they can do that on a single roll of a 6. So you put this with poison, I guess, yeah, there's a good chance that they could even kill a Riptide or a Wraith Knight with a single bad combination roll by either or. Like the Wraith Knight doesn't have a vulnerable save. Shrike gets up to it, rolls a 4 to rolls easy enough to hit, then rolls a 6 to wound because he's got poison. If it's AP3, the Wraith Knight's dead. Wow. So pretty good combination in that aspect there. Crushing Claws are interesting. They will help the medium bugs, somewhat medium monstrous creatures, because it's +1 strength. The AP2 is meaningless to those creatures, and armor main, so I'm not really sure how much more effective. I kind of almost wish they had more attacks. That would have felt better for me there. Lash Whips, I think I like the fact that they're +3 to the bonus initiative for the model now. There's no longer dropping it to 1. Within a lot of the Tyranids initiatives, it should bonus them right up to where they need to be to hitting first anyway, so that works. The Lash Whip and Bone Sword are referred to as a combination thing, which is, you know, giving you the Swift Strike, which is the +3 initiative, to the Life Drain, same roll as 6. The Rending Claws did get a little bit of boost because now they're definitely AP 5, meaning armor 5s and 6s are now dead from any creatures with these. So Tyranids, especially Gene Stealers, can go through guard now. Once they hit them and wound them, they're dead. They're not going to get much of a protective save without that type of armor. Scything Talons no longer reroll on 1s. That's a big tough thing to deal with. They got AP 6, but that's only mattered to a small amount of units. So really, you're just working that with the combinations for the extra attack on the Tyranid model. Pretty sore. Your ranged weaponries have not changed. They're pretty much straight, all across the table that I looked at. I didn't see any much difference. The big Devourer guns that you'd put on your Hive Tyrants didn't really change at all. Flesh Borers, all these things are pretty much the same. The biggest thing is the Spore Mines. You want to check into that because now they're moving in the shooting end as a run or charging, which means you're actually aiming the spore at a unit from there. So that is pretty much just different from that aspect. Check that out. Acid Blood, virtually acting most the same. Strength 5, AP2, ignore cover if you wound the model. Acid Model, though, you have to give up all your attacks to make it happen. Adrenal Glands are the same. You have the Blinding Venom, which I mentioned. If you hit, it will give you the poison. And now the new thing is Regeneration. It used to happen on a 6, but that was all wounds that the model had taken. Okay, one of the big changes is Toxic Miasma. Before, this affected at the end of the assault phase any model within base combat that basically kind of filed in would have to take a test. Now it is a Strength 3, no AP value, ignore cover. I don't understand why they do ignore cover unless, because melee you're not really supposed to have it, but I guess it's just a double check in people unsure. So it's a one-time, once per game only, and basically you'll come up, basically hit, and it's done at the at initiative step 1, so near the end of the phase anyways. So I'm not really sure about this power. It's definitely a weakening to the old Toxic Miasma if if the creature has it. Not a big deal. The Venom Thorn's the one that always automatically came with it. Many times for me, he never survived too long, or if he did, he barely could do anything anyways. So, not a real major issue with him for that. Flesh hooks now are key because they basically give Tyranids the ability to attack at their initiative to models in cover. So flesh hooks, spine bangs, if you take these models, you're planning on assaulting, take them because they basically allow you to assault at your initiative step. They also, at least at strength 6, for lictors, will give the strength of the user an assault 2. So a lictor can get 2 shots, rear armor, like I said, showing up on a vehicle for that aspect there. There are no AP values, so they're not very good against any type of infantry model. So again, very rare. Toxic sacks, we all know, they're still poison, nothing has changed, and wings are exactly where they were before. There's a list of tail biomorphs that seem to be on par from the old Forge World models that were some things listed for those units for that aspect there. Some things that are rending, some are poison. None of them help with any other current biomorphs. They're just kind of like an outside entity on top of the creature that uses them. So you have to be kind of wary how that kind of plays itself out. The bio artifacts, there's a list right here. The Norn Crown will increase range if you're worried about it. The biggest thing that popped right out were 2 of them with the Emergal factor, because you'll get 3 things. You have to alter it per turn, but you can get the improved armor save, so you can have your flying hive tyrant early on have an improved armor by 1, or increase its attack, or increase its strength. So those are your 3 choices. I think they can play very quickly into your tactics as you're moving about. So kind of continue to use that. So it's a very big power that you can use. Only 1 per army, but you can have several models with these bio artifacts. The other thing is the Reaper of Oblatrix. It's basically a bone sword in any aspect there, having the life drain, having the swift strike, very much similar to the lash whip. So you have +1 strength. This thing is giving you, it's AP3, pretty much only viable if you're using the prime, but all the other creatures will be using, if it's a monster creature, using AP2. It'll life drain, so insta death on a 6 on the wound, but with the shred, it's likely to get to re-roll those wounds. So a very, very powerful weapon there. So I like that. Now here's the other big controversy to the Tyranid list. For some reason, of all the codexes that have come out, the Tyranids Codex is the only one that got taken away from the basic rulebook. All of the codexes gave you a new power to work with a lot of different choices, upgrades, plus the basic rulebook power that was listed of the Tyranids, of the armies that were given the choices to the powers. For whatever reason, they decided that is no longer a viable choice for Tyranid players. You will now only be rolling out of your rulebook for your powers, and this is a little difficult in some aspects because part of it, your default Primus power is Dominion, which will increase your synapse range to 6 inches. That's kind of like, I mean, if you have multiple powers, that's fine, but if you're really kind of looking for a power of some punch, that's a kind of a blow. I don't know. I'm still kind of up in the air about that aspect there to see how this will kind of work out. Not to mention, just to get the 6 inches, you're going to have to cast the spell. It's a blessing, so there's still chances for that not to even go off. So I'm not really sure I like that. They're all now stuck with this, at least like with telepathy, which I use. You have the psychic shriek, you can do a little bit of that, or the other one, with smite, you had some options to be offensive. Now, you're not. Catalyst is pretty much the feel no pain. It's better than the Codex rulebook from prior before, because it's not only the psyker that he will get feel no pain, he'll get to nominate one of the unit within 12 inches, so you're getting a double for that, but it's only rollable 1, so that's kind of like where you have to deal with that aspect there. The horror is what we talked about before with the Broodlord. It's the malediction, the kind of pin at -2. Not powerful, it's okay, but you're going to go with that. Onslaught is helpful more or less to units with guns so they can run and shoot. It can be usable for a lot of what you want to do, especially trying to get in range, because a lot of the Tyranid weapons are not long distance weaponry, so you really want to get that extra movement so they can go up to 7 to 12 inches on that face and then be able to fire. Pyrexium is a lot worse than it was before. It's only a D3, so you can only possibly be reducing their weapon skill and ballistic skill by 1, where before it was down to 1, to a maximum of, like I said, a 3. So not all that good. I mean, every effect changes some things. Against certain creatures, it can be a big deal, especially versus the Swarm Lord with weapon skill 9. That could cause that slight thing could be an effect right there. It is now classified as a malediction, so it can now affect units in close combat. So at least the affecting power can. The bonus of that is it can be affecting in every phase that the Tyranid warriors is in combat with now. Before, it was all these things were shooting things in the Tyranid psychic powers. So now you have an opportunity to actually keep the effect going at the random ability. The other one that's pretty powerful is the Psychic Stream. This is very powerful because this is what the old Doom of Malatai could kind of do. But now it definitely will not allow you armor, will not definitely allow you cover, and it is Nova. So before, with the Doom had that same range effect in here. All these models that do get Psychic Stream can do this, and it is Nova. So if more of these multiple models are kind of landing in there, they're going to do the effect all through, and it's 2d6 plus 2 leadership. So instead of you're going to put a bonus to this dice roll, so that's going to make that effect and cause some moons. So up to 14 versus whatever the opponent's leadership is, can do the damage. And if they are a Psyker, that's -3 to that. So there's a big range already that could do some real damage to psychic things, especially if you're playing demons. Be very careful of Nova Psychic Stream, because you're going to be a -3 if you're casting psychic spells, and they're going to give you a 2d6 plus 2 versus your leadership. You're going to probably die pretty easy. You better hope that invulnerable save helps a lot. Warp Blast, they did change that. I believe it was from a Lance AP 1. Look back on our old Zoanthrope. So yeah, we gotta find his little power here. Yeah, his strength 10 one was AP 1. It's now moving up to AP 2. Distance, everything else hasn't really changed a lot of that. It is a warp charge 2, so basically your Zoanthropes are firing only 1 blast per Zoanthrope in the squad from that aspect there. So you're pretty much working with that in terms of its compatibility. So there's a psychic power there, and as you can see where the little noise is coming from our little spawn minion from behind me. Alright, the rest of it pretty much is the organization. The biggest things now, all the characters except for the Red Terror are in the HQ choice, so you're going to have to deal with that. You're not going to get a lot of those big guys from that aspect power there. There are points reductions, but you got to be careful, watch the upgrades. They have increased for a lot of points for a lot of models there. So we're going to, I'm going to try to get some battle reports up for this, to see exactly how much of a lot of changes it is. I'm going to probably try to use some of the armies that I had done priorly before, so we can see exactly how much of a drop off. But we also want to use some different things in there. Like I said, I want to definitely use the Crone. I think it's going to be pretty powerful from there. So this is very in depth. I wanted to go a little bit more in depth than a flash, because there has been a lot of outcry over this codex and how effective things how effective things are. There's definitely some combinations in here. You just got to kind of look for it. And read between the lines. There are some things you're going to have to deal with being changes, but if you have seen from all these other codexes before, that's what Tyranid players have had to do over the course of GW's life. They're not as consistent as Space Marines. There are things that all of a sudden got worse. There are things that got better. There are units that got removed. There are units that got added. You're going to have to understand them and look at how those units are added to the army to improve that. So I hope you enjoyed this. I know that it was very lengthy, but again, this is for your benefit to hopefully understand through someone who's played Tyranids over the decade, to really understand exactly what this army can do for you. And I hope that will help. And we hopefully watch some of our bat reps so you can get a better understanding how to play these armies. This is Spectre Senence. This is my son Jackson, the youngest of my brood, and hopefully you guys will follow our battle reports and enjoy. Subscribe.